Um, oh, thanks, Megan. I just want to kick things off by welcoming Asher and welcoming all of you. I'm so excited to be facilitating this conversation as part of our monthly effort to share more transparently what we're doing, what we're working on at Climate Farm School, and bring in some of the amazing farmers and partner sites that we're growing relationships with. So it's not all happening, virtually behind the scenes in our kind of program off season between like end of October and March. So I'm really excited to talk to Asher more about our growing program collaborations. Asher Wright is the farm director at Caney Fork Farms, and he'll talk a little bit more about himself and his role and background. But I just want to give some context on how I first met Asher. It was actually in 2 years ago, in January of 2024, when Climate Farm School was joining Idea Garden Institute as a new program within the nonprofit. And Idea Garden is amazing. And they also host a program called the Farmpreneurs Program that helps farmers develop social entrepreneurship and business skills to really grow beyond the first 3 to 5 years of like doing it and making it just surviving as a farmer and getting farmers into a place of thriving as they feed their communities and provide a ton of ecosystem services in the process by farming more and more regeneratively. So Asher was, I think, brought in as like a host site and participant in the Farmpreneurs program, and I got to connect with him and start to also participate in the Climate Underground conferences that are hosted at Caney Fork Farms. And the first time I went to Caney Fork in the fall of 2024, I was just like, I'd never seen anything like it as far as connecting the climate community to the realities of what's happening on the land with regenerative farms and farmers being central deliverers of climate knowledge and education. There's such an important role to play in adapting to climate impacts that are already happening and mitigating future climate impacts by farming in a way that grows food and restores ecosystems. And Caney Fork Farms is doing that in such a beautiful way. So from the very beginning, I was like, how can we bring some people to Caney Fork to learn and share and draw inspiration from the work on the ground? And over the past year, it's become more and more clear to us and other farms across our network that the healthcare space is a place that can sort of heal concurrently with land and regenerative farming. So we started to talk about how we might bring local healthcare students and professionals and physicians onto Caney Fork Farms for sort of food as medicine training on the farm. That's accredited for continuing medical education and that fits into potentially upstream residency and medical school training cycles as well. So that is what we are excited to talk together with all of you a little bit more today. Um, let's see, I actually found your bio, Asher, but I'm not going to read it. I'm just going to turn it over to you to share a little bit more about your background, how you got into farming, and what brought you to Caney Fork.
That's great. Thanks, Laney. And thanks everybody making the time to be here today. The gift of time is special. Appreciate y'all just showing up and being here. So thank you. Full disclosure, my nanny had to take her daughter to the doctor. And so I've got my 3-year-old son is in the living room. So there's a small chance I have to mute and do something like this. And then I'll be right back. So I apologize for that, but it's just life. And my wife's a nurse, actually. She's working, she works a few days a month. So she's there today. And yeah, so it's all part of the journey. And just wanted to let you guys know that. But brief background, because I know there's other important things to talk about. And that is that I kind of think of myself as a landless agrarian in that my family sold the farm that we had in the 30s in Virginia. And I grew up a generation or two removed from agriculture in the suburbs of North Atlanta and was really like, I guess, many people looking for a sense of meaning and purpose and found my way to a small liberal arts college in Western North Carolina that's dear to my heart called Warren Wilson College. And there they have a work program where students have to work somewhere on campus as a part of the curriculum. And I wanted to work on the farm. So I had a big working farm there and sold products into the community. It was a big mixed crop and livestock operation. That really I got my start into agriculture there and really found my calling. And I say that because in some ways I've always been a student of sustainable agriculture, is what they called it then. And that's kind of evolved and grown into the term we're more regularly using now, regenerative agriculture. And that career path sent me to manage some farms and travel the Western Hemisphere, learning more about agroecology and eco-ag and all of the kind of biological and organic farming practices that were interesting to me. And found my way to Clemson. So I ended up with a master's in animal science. This is really kind of what stimulated my interest in the nexus between food and nutrition. And we looked at, we finished over 2 years at two groups of grass-fed beef, with or without a grain supplementation, so a very small amount of grain in their diet. And then we compared those afterwards, not only looking at the animal performance metrics like their gains, but also USDA carcass metrics, what an inspector and a USDA grader would look at, like is this choice or select, that type of a thing. And then we took it all the way down to the nutritional components, looking at fatty acid profile, fat soluble vitamins, as well as the mineral profile of the meat. So I started to really get excited about just this connection between human health, animal health, and the land. And after a grad school, I realized that I just really wanted to be a practitioner and have been essentially in different management and director positions since over the past 12 years now. And that's what led me to Caney Fork Farms. And we're over here in Middle Tennessee. And we are a for profit farm, farming about 550 acres. We do beef, pork, lamb, and we have a chestnut agroforestry operation that the sheep graze in. So, integrated into our perennial ecosystem are those chestnuts. And then we have a mixed vegetable operation as well. And then in additional to that, we have some small heirloom grain crops. So small fields around 13, 15 acres, not huge. We're primarily in the direct to consumer space, but we also have some wholesale markets. And then in addition to that, we have a essentially a program within the for-profit structure that's kind of for the public good. We call it our research and outreach activities. And that's about a quarter of my time. And this fits into that bucket. So we have a number of long-term studies happening on the farm throughout the year. We're looking at soil health and soil carbon. We're looking at biodiversity, and we've got a water quality, water monitoring sites going in. So we're essentially using this farm as a long-term study site. And then we have these various other areas that we kind of engage in the community with. And so that's essentially my background. And I think just to finish this up on who Caney Fork Farms is. We are owned by the Gore family. So my boss is former Vice President Al Gore. And despite the ownership, we're essentially a collection of farmers, educators, researchers, professionals in this space with aligning with really one common purpose, which is cultivating a thriving and just food system while restoring soil carbon through our regenerative and organic practices. And we actually just kind of reevaluated our vision and where we're headed, and really landed on this just piece of like what's good and right. And I feel like this type of work, it really lands in that. And there's many other ways that we try to live into that kind of purpose day to day. That's who we are and how we try to make, our decisions kind of are in line with that purpose and our vision. And so I think I can stop with that. I feel like that's a decent intro. Set the
I love
stage.
that. Yeah, thanks, Asher. That's becoming like a kind of emerging criteria, I think I would say, of the farms that we are in partnership with at Climate Farm School. It's like both a focus on climate resilient regenerative practices and health of communities, but the justice and just piece has been coming up more and more. Our one of our instructors just launched the Center for Just Food Systems at Sonoma State University. And yeah, I think that's just like I don't know, a beautiful reminder that that is ultimately pretty core to the work. And some of the other things we'll get into about like why bring doctors to a farm, I
Mhm.
think relates back to that. And I am going to come back to the piece about the nutritional quality of foods grown on farms like Caney Fork, because I think that's a really big topic with some nuance around it to explore. But first, I'm gonna just share like a little bit more about who Stephanie is in case she joins us in the conversation. But even if she doesn't, I think her role and partnership in what we're hoping to build at Caney Fork with Climate Farm School is essential. So I met Stephanie at this most recent Climate Underground conference in October 2025 and happened to sit next to her on the bus from Nashville to Caney Fork. And I was like, "Who are you?" And she was like, I'm assistant professor of pediatrics, um, clinical pediatrics at Vanderbilt University Medical Center. And she is incredibly interested and focused on ways to bring both her students and her other attending physicians onto farms to understand the food systems piece of human health from starting with how food is grown and why that matters. So at Vanderbilt University Medical Center, Dr. Patterson conducts research evaluating host microbiome interactions during critical illness. She is investigating the gastrointestinal microbiome in patients with congenital heart disease and critical illness to establish ways the microbiome changes and impacts patient nutritional and infectious disease outcomes. And so she has multidisciplinary teams working to establish a microbiome biorepository, which will be foundational to the study of microbiome and metabolic alterations during specific disease states, and allow her to discover treatments to optimize the gastrointestinal microbiome and improve patient outcomes. So I think just in summarizing that, it's maybe clear why she wants to bring her work and her research and teams onto farms where really kind of our gut microbiome kind of starts and can be seeded with the soil microbiome that flows into plants and animals and the products that we consume as humans. So I think that piece of how your food is grown and why that matters to doctors and human health is not new. There were studies from the early 1900s of, like rats fed, a nutritious whole grain diet with vegetables produced on small gardens in England did way better and didn't fight and kill each other compared to rats that were fed what was more commonly coming out back in the day of, conventional white flour. So we've known that these connections exist, but it's not prevalent in today's healthcare system by any means. So Stephanie and Asher and the director of research at Caney Fork, Emily, and I started talking this fall about bringing a cohort to hopefully pilot in this coming fall of physicians, residents, and medical students to explore the foundations of human health on the farm. And I think some of that microbiome research, how the soil microbiome relates to the gut microbiome, and some of the nutritional analyses that are also happening through research partnerships with Caney Fork will be really awesome to surface and highlight. Um, so Asher, I want to get back to what you said about studying the differences between grass-fed and grain-fed animals in animal science. And I'm just curious, like what research is happening now at Caney Fork on either soil health or the nutritional quality of food or both that you think kind of speaks to this connection between regenerative farming and human health?
So, I think so. Right now, where we're at is that we we've worked with Audacious over the last year using their lab, and we sent off one of each crop family off to Audacious,
Mm,
essentially. So we've got 8 crop families represented there at the moment, and they should have everything back by the end of next week. But we looked at chard, carrots, tomatoes, garlic, bok choy, butternut squash, field peas like a dried cow pea, wheat, and there might be one more because I'm trying to do this from memory. But we sent these crop
mm,
families off trying to understand how how our management practices are impacting the nutrition of the food, essentially, is what we're really looking at. And part of our marketing uniques is that we are actually doing this. We are looking at nutrition, nutrient density, looking at that in comparison to benchmarks, current FDA requirements, and using that information to tie back to can we make some meaningful change here with our management practices. I think the macronutrient world is pretty well understood generally with what's in the crop. And I think what we're seeing in organic ag is at times that we are below the USDA standards. And I think some of that is we're relying, this is what we're trying to understand. So I don't really have all the answers, but I can tell you where we're at right now. And that is that we, we're seeing we're seeing that we're below on some of the nutrients, and then some are much higher. And the ones that are higher that we typically have like rich or good sources of, according to FDA, are the vitamins and some of the plant compounds, some of the secondary, like the
Yeah.
bioactive compounds and the metabolites. Others were
Yeah.
not, and so we're kind of trying to understand what's driving these nutrient differences. You know, plants take up these elements that are in the soil as cations and anions, right? And if they're not there, they're not going to be taken up. And so that's one place, big, large operations that have a very strong fertility program, you might end up seeing more nutrient dense produce. We're relying on more of a closed circular bioeconomy thing with our compost and nutrient cycling that way with small organic amendments here and there. And so that's kind of what we're trying to understand. And we're literally at the point of meeting with the team in 2 weeks. We'll have all of our reports to better understand. Look, we saw these areas. I think we're interested in elevating these. And what can we do during our kind of summer and fall cropping experience to try to elevate some of these nutrients and see how that works? That's kind of where we're at with kind of looking at our nutrition. There's obviously a lot of tissue sampling and stuff that can be, live during the season, like while you're growing, you can take a tissue sample and see if you're deficient and
Mm.
mitigate that way. That's a
Yeah.
big part of what advancing eco-ag does as a business model. And that
Mm.
works for some crops and it's not as great for others. So we're still in a learning phase, to be
Mm.
honest. On the
Mm-hmm.
meat side, um, we actually are just about to send some meat samples off, but I would argue that this is pretty well vetted and pretty well understood. I think
Mm-hmm.
I worked for Dr. Susan Duckett, who was a leading researcher and still is really leading the charge on the fatty acid profile of meat and that kind of difference between grass-fed and grain-finished meats. And a lot of it has to do with your fatty acid profile and your fat-soluble vitamins like vitamin E,
Mm.
um, and your vitamin A precursor, the tocopherols, or I believe I'm pronouncing that right. But those are generally elevated in your grass-fed and finished operations. And y'all might know this, but I might say grass-fed and finished. I might say 100% grass-fed. That's the same thing. In terms of that, we're talking about animals where their full life was on forage, whether it's hay or what they're actually out there grazing. And I'm specifically talking about cattle and sheep. What I say that this is very well vetted is just this is research that's 20 years old. We really
Mm.
understand what the omega-6, omega-3 ratio is. Sure, there's
Mm-hmm.
some nuances. Is it 1 to 1? Is it 3 to 1? Is it 2.5 to 1? But
Mm-hmm.
95% of the time, even more, that grass-fed beef animal is going to have an omega-6, omega-3 fatty acid ratio that is in line with what human health experts say is the best for us. Then that's
Mm.
obviously helpful with inflammation and cholesterol metabolism and things like that. And on the other side, the new emerging thing that I think is very exciting, and we may or may not do this because of the high cost. And I think it's honestly, I'd rather just not spend the money and cite the research, but is the work that Stefan von Vallée has been doing, the Bionutrient Institute, but really out of Utah State. And that's looking at, he started this work at Duke and then got a faculty position at Utah. This is this connection between plant nutrient density and meat. And it's getting way beyond the macronutrients into these bioactive compounds. And essentially, he's been able to demonstrate that feedlot cattle are showing biomarkers of an immunosuppressed human. And that if this is the blood that we pulled out of a human, we might be like, oh crap, like you're not, you are sick. And so there's really no surprise. This is the connection he's made that you eat sick animals, you're going to be sick. And so and he draws the beautiful example of you go and eat a fresh, diverse salad. What's your blood going to look like an hour later versus you go and eat some junk food, ultra processed food? What's your blood chemistry going to look like later? The beef animal is the same thing, generally speaking. And so there's a lot of
Mm-hmm.
really cool research emerging there. And that's one of the things I'm most excited about, knowing that, I don't know the specifics because it's been researched on other farms, and that's kind of where we want to know it. But that we're sending out a nutrient dense meat product. And so if I were gonna, and I'll wrap
Hmm.
it up with this, the meat, I'm really confident. My confidence is up here that like our management practices are positively impacting human health. On the vegetable side, I don't know as much yet. And I think I'm still trying to wrap my mind around. And I honestly think we are as an industry still, and this is like what Audacious's role is playing, is like we hear all
Mm.
the time soil health is going to make a more nutrient dense product, but I feel like that's being generalized and we need to understand
Hmm.
it a little bit more. Um,
Hmm.
and I'm just, it's hard for me to go out there and just make this bold claim. I think our gut, we understand that surely something's there. Healthy, diverse
Hmm.
microbial communities, more complex biocompounds that the plants are making. There's obviously a connection to all of this, but I think we're
Hmm.
still in the phase of trying to fully understand it. And again, I'm a generalist farmer, not a nutritionist and or a
Hmm.
scientist, but that's kind of where we're at.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks for summarizing that, Asher. That was a great summary of the research and a lot of nuance that's out there. And I think, yeah, the nutrient density piece when it comes to vegetables is, I think, there's a lot of nuance there. And like, I might be someone who generally believes the claim that like food grown in healthy soil is healthier for the people eating it. But yeah, when it comes to vegetables, I mean, I'll just put in the chat a note about the best resource that I have found on this is David Montgomery and Ambi Clay's book, What Your Food Ate, and but it talks about some of the micronutrients and anti-inflammatory compounds and things that we don't even normally measure and study in traditional nutritional analyses that look at macronutrients. And those things might be there in a vegetable grown in healthy soil and just not in like other vegetables. But then you have to think about the context of like, we don't, unfortunately, most of our diet is not vegetables, or it's fewer vegetables than we should be consuming. So looking at meat, which is very, very commonly consumed, like high percentage of the plate for most Americans, and grains, are places where you can start to see some like, really clearer differences. And some of the nutritional analyses I've been reading have been digging into like, yeah, meats
Yeah.
and grains and things that we eat
Yep.
a lot of.
That's a
Uh,
great point. And what Audacious tells me is that look, we are seeing these phenolic groups, we are seeing these carotenoids, but there's not an understanding yet of what is sufficient, there's a lot of there's a number of them that are just there's not really a recommended daily intake. And so a company like
mhm,
Audacious is like cautious to make a claim.
mhm,
But they are existing, and this is exactly what Stefan's research is showing on the meat side is like, wow, this
mhm,
meat is loaded with these bioactive compounds that are antioxidants, that are anti-carcinogenic, that are metabolic regulators, that are all these things that we know they do that in a setting. We may not know
mhm,
how much is enough or too much, but we do
mhm.
know that they've done that in this kind of specialized research environment that we have in the US.
Yeah.
And we know that they're just absent in the feedlot beef. So there's something there. We just got to keep pushing on. And that's why I love this conversation and what we're all
Yeah.
trying to do.
Totally. Yeah, I feel like kind of bridging into the why are we bringing doctors to a farm question. We have had a few doctors just find themselves showing up at Climate Farm School programs over the years, and I think it was really interesting to me that one of them, who was also an advisor and professor for me at UC Berkeley, when I was asking her about some of the exciting nutrition and nutrient density research I was starting to read, I was like, is this the reason that everyone should be supporting regenerative agriculture? And she was like, no, absolutely not. Like, I'm an academic doctor, medical professional, scientist, and like the research is not yet like perfectly clear, like you were saying, Asher, of like how much of these important, cool new compounds and micronutrients do we need? Like, what is it doing inside of the human body? And given all of our environmental exposures and like diversity of people's lived experiences, like there's a lot that we still don't know. It's super awesome that people are doing the research, but there's just so many reasons to support something like a regenerative farming setting for the multiple roles that it's playing. And so it was like a perfect advisor moment where she was like, don't get too excited about the latest shiny silver object of like nutrient density research, but keep taking the long and holistic view. Like I might have gotten into farming as a way to relieve some eco and climate anxiety as a grad student and find relief in feeling like I'm doing something to sequester carbon back into the ground by growing plants. But again, like, get it like saying that farming is going to solve climate change is just not like it's not what we do and preach at Climate Farm School. There's just so many interesting layers to the like why farm regeneratively, why farm at all, if you're not someone who grew up doing that. Um, So anyways, I think that's just,
Yeah.
yeah, we're not here
I
to like
think
sell them.
this touches a little on like the excitement about the promotion of this. And I think we lean towards the nutrition side because that's important. But I think the other thing, especially in organic operations and operations that are reducing these types of inputs, are we can tend to leave out or overlook the role that regenerative farms are playing in environmental health and how that is indirectly impacting human health. And there's a
Hmm.
lot of, everything from synthetic inputs that are known carcinogens to nitrate poisoning in water wells, all of these societal costs that are kind of showing up in our health system. Not all of them, but a lot of them are tied back to the food system we created for farmers to operate within. I'm very much of the mindset that our food system is not broken and it is working exactly the way it's designed to function. It's been designed to extract and accumulate wealth. And when you hold this narrative, it allows you, as someone who's a purist in the organic world, to appreciate the position that farmers and ranchers are in because of
Hmm.
the macroeconomic wave that's upon them while we're trying to do all these little microeconomic plays. And I say
Hmm.
all that just because this conversation can immediately look at like, ooh, you're the bad farmer. You're putting a
Hmm.
fungicide out. And my
Hmm.
camp has done an immense disservice to the planet by just alienating everybody by saying you are bad. And that's
Hmm.
something I've just really struggled with and that I'm coming to terms
Yeah.
with here. I just say all that because there's the whole, and it was a bit of a tangent. I'm sorry, but there's the
Hmm.
whole the human health argument to make of removing inputs that are ultimately making us sick that then we're trying to treat with food as medicine. So
Hmm.
there's a cycle here is all I'm pointing out. And
Hmm.
that's part of the interest at Climate Underground and why we had green light biosciences with like a non-transgenic RNA tech that's, basically eliminating the potato beetle without having to spray a fungicide. You've got Clint Brower at the Greenfield Robotics looking at ways to manage weed pressure mechanically and not chemically. And I think we just have to hold these things in our mind that there's a preventative angle to this. Obviously, nutrition is prevention, but nutrition is also treatment, which I'm sure we can unpack today. And I think that's
Yeah.
one of the cool things that I've been learning in this space. So, anyway, bit of a ramble, but
Yeah.
I couldn't help but dump it all out there.
No, that's great. That's like exactly what we're here for. And I think I was just trying to like find a quote that I actually wrote down in my phone from this summer being out with Jay Goldmark in the Hudson Valley in his amazing regenerative organic grain fields and having him say something similar about like we're like, "Oh my God, how are you doing this?" And like, yes, it's a for-profit farm. Yes, it also has support from the Rockefeller family. And like, but he's like, there's no bad farmers. There's just like a bad system that has all farmers struggling to make it in their own unique creative ways, whether you have like a billionaire family, making sure you don't fail, or like you are seeking out these creative partnerships to take care of soil health and human health and grow food. Like it's not cut and dry yet. So I think that there's just a big lever for the healthcare industry to play, possibly on the procurement side and possibly on the like just being more in touch with farmers and the lived reality side. But as we'll maybe get into about like why you're excited to have doctors on the farm, there's also this worry that doctors have expressed to me of like, well, I can't just tell people to go out and source regeneratively and organically food grown in healthy soil because it's more expensive and it's not available and like it's not the way that the system is designed to produce food. So what do I actually like go and do and tell my patients? So I think there is sort of an institutional and like system collective responsibility to try to like solve more of these problems by institutions that can afford it taking some onus of responsibility and then like rippling it down through the patient care cycles or connecting people to some of the abundance created in living in a regenerative regional food system. But I think
Mm,
there's like a fear almost of like, well, what if we realize that these systems are better? It's not the system that we have, but we're tell people like go do that. We don't want to create some sort of like blame shame game with patients, nor with farmers who are like, oh, you're a bad farmer, or like you're bad because you're eating, potato chips, but that's all you can afford. Um,
Mhm.
So, anyways, okay, that's that sort of aside. I want to just come back to like why is the team at Caney Fork, or you in particular, excited to bring medical doctors and medical professionals to the farm? Like, what got you interested in this partnership? What are you sort of hoping that we'll collectively achieve?
Yeah, I think there's something special when you get out on the land and you have that opportunity to take a clarity break, to be able to be in connection with nature, I think. And I can't think of a more disconnected place from nature than a hospital or a medical office. Like that to me is the exact opposite end of the spectrum, right? Like everything's sterile and we're killing everything and making super bugs and
Mm,
which I get. But that's being able to provide that privilege to doctors to me is very important. Some have experienced this, others may never have had this experience in this way. And so I just
hmm
think that there is a presence and a thing that kind of emerges from having your learning environment be so connected to the land. And when you take your little stretch break or whatever in your day, you get to go and walk and connect and see and feel. And honestly, in
mm,
September, I can't think of a better time. I mean, the biodiversity and the life on the land in September is just amazing. And it's probably one of the most diverse, visually diverse times of the year for us. From
mm,
plant species to insects to everything, all the crops that are growing, it's a vibrant time. So that's
mm.
one thing is just having the privilege of like, look, we can
Yeah.
host this. And I think there's meaningful connection. I think one of the other reasons, besides kind of what we've talked about, of just and we kind of need to mainstream some of these ideas and get smart, capable people talking about the potato chip thing you said. Yeah,
Mm,
there's an income gap that's creating an issue here for people to afford. Like, let's talk about that. How do we
hmm
address that? And this is an elephant in the room. We need to talk about this
hmm
elephant, right? So
hmm
getting people comfortable with talking about that elephant and not
hmm
feeling helpless
hmm
is, I think, important. And that's another emergent thing. And I mean,
hmm
generally speaking, we as society, I believe, hold doctors in high regard, and I believe that doctors and people in power have a responsibility to begin advocating for this type of thing. It's like you're a
hmm
doctor. You've gone through a tremendous amount of education.
hmm
And you've learned a lot. And you are
hmm
like the end all be all in that hospital, right? My
hmm
wife's a nurse. I know she does a lot of the patient care and I understand like those things. But I just mean like
Yeah.
society, we're like, that's a doctor. So I
Yeah.
want to see doctors leading more and being that's why and I was going to compliment Stephanie, like just she's like doing this on her own. This isn't really built into the way that I see it into her daily responsibilities. And
Mm,
that's where but it could be. And so starting
mhm.
with these kind of early adopters and these movers and shakers and
Yeah.
getting them out there, I think is another reason I'm interested in engaging with doctors. Personal life
hmm
goal, impact.
hmm
Caney Fork Farms, impact. So, like,
hmm
what are the levers I have in the short life that I have to pull? And so
hmm
that's where, like, in a holistic management, we have the whole concept of like, what's the greatest return for energy time invested?
Yeah.
And this to me is an opportunity in the 2 days to just have a couple of ahas and keep trickling it out. Of course, all of the emergent learning outcomes and the benefits they'll get for continuing medical education and
hmm
those types of things are valuable. But it's kind of like
hmm
bigger picture of like getting this snowball effect, the momentum here is I think what really drew me to just being excited to participate in this.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I've been trying to write down what some of the intended impacts on doctors, physicians, residents would be from participating in a program like this on the farm. And I almost feel like I'm like a little bit like, are we jumping the gun? Because it feels like it's sort of like where it's early, it's like early stage, and it'll be sort of the first type of program like of this like of its kind for a lot of continuing medical education and residency programs. And we've seen that in conversations out here in California and conversations we're starting to have in New York. Like it's not the common practice for doctors to come to farms to learn for their residencies or CME types of trainings. So I do feel like we're establishing a proof of concept that has huge potential for impact from like what we've collectively already seen from running programs and bringing people onto diversified regenerative farms. And the outcomes, they are going to be emergent. Some of them we might think we know, some of them we'll realize by just starting to do this. But I think I get really excited about these proof of concepts too, because like I think yeah, there's just like such a clear opportunity to bring more doctors who are already leaning in a little bit to be like true champions and change makers for a more regenerative food system. And yeah, people look up to them, they listen to them. They're also there's other systemic things to resolve, but like we can start to do that when we, get engaged, inspired, empowered in communities like what we would build, in a program together at Caney Fork. And I think, yeah, I just a friend of mine who's a orthopedic surgeon talks to his, patients after he's operated on them on what to eat post surgery to help your body recover more quickly, avoid inflammatory foods. And he was like, "Yeah, I just do this for myself. So like, why wouldn't I do this for my patients?" And everyone else that he's told that he does this is just like, "Well, how do you know what to tell them? Like, we have no idea." And so there's just so many dots to connect, and it's not an enormous lift, but it's a really significant one. I think once you get that conversation started and that exposure to knowledge and people that see, just a lot of patients in their professional lives. So I'm excited to see what happens.
Yeah. I don't think we can't really have decision paralysis here because it's so scaled and complex that the quote unquote challenges. And I think that's why I'm
Yeah.
eager to just start. And I think it was very great what you said of there's going to be these outcomes that we aren't expecting. There's outcomes we will. We're going
Mm.
to learn a whole lot about this. And in
Mhm.
farming and entrepreneurship in general, indecision is always the worst decision. Like you're always better starting, getting feedback, adapting, and moving forward. That's where you get momentum. And so that's
Mm.
where I'm like, is this gonna be A plus for everybody? I mean, yes, with what we can do now, but in reality, like what it's gonna be in 2, 3, 4 years,
Yeah.
no. But we
Yeah.
have to start here. And that's what I'm super excited about doing. And I feel the decision paralysis for doctors too, and just the liability and the concern and the
Mhm.
smarter and more qualified you get, the more you always discount your knowledge and say, well, I'm not an expert in that area and I don't really know, or that's not researched enough. And
Mm.
I can't go off my gut because every time I did that in my seminar, I got drilled by 15 other PhDs in the room. Like I've seen that all happen. And in some ways it's like helpful because it helps us get to the right answer, but at the
Mhm.
same time, then it just slows us way down because of just this
Yeah.
insecurity of being wrong and this fear of liability. All those things are very important. But so
Yeah.
it's like, I just see like that. I'm getting at that because of the doctor you mentioned that said, I eat like this. Why wouldn't I say it? And then someone being insecure to say, well, how do you know? It's like, well,
Yeah.
what I know is I know what is the opposite of this. And maybe I don't know everything in this bucket, but I know that
Yeah.
these things do create inflammation. And I know that inflammation leads to these things. So I
Yeah.
just say low inflammatory diet. And I just really admire that boldness and I don't take it for granted. And I also respect and understand that there's bureaucratic systems and issues in all these human institutions that may
Mhm.
prevent someone who wants to do that from actually
Mhm.
doing it. So I'm just
Mhm.
saying that because I don't want to sound like insensitive to the challenges of being a doctor in a hospital and all
Yeah.
of that chain of command. I can only
Yeah.
imagine what that's like. So
Yeah, no, totally. That's such a good point. And I mean, yeah, like with most things, if you do feel like you have a community around you who's like supportive of what you're generally trying to do, even if it's just like start a little conversation with a patient about food and it's not like, grounded in the most compelling, rigorous, or the research doesn't even exist to show that what you're saying is true. Yeah, to feel like there's some community if there's like, backlash or challenges, like that's so crucial to even like surviving challenge like that and taking continued next steps. So I think that's the other thing we build with all of our programming is sort of a community, a cohort, a sense of camaraderie and like deeper personal relationships that we'll all need to rely on at some point for sure.
that's
So
very true.
yeah. Well, I
We're
see a
stronger
question coming
together.
in to the chat. I know for sure. One of our other last month speakers was like, just don't do hard things alone. That's my mantra. And I was like, huh, I'm gonna think about that more. I really liked it. Um, but yeah, I'm gonna bring in Sheila's question and then we can
Yeah.
maybe open it up to more questions for the group in the last 15 minutes here. Sheila says, I'm curious if you ever have these conversations with investors slash funders. This cascade from soil health to human health is extremely important and compelling. But how do you convey the economic opportunity of this beyond the smart impact? I hate to bring it down to the money, but that's often a need for momentum. Do you have any? I'll let you respond to that first, and then I'll think of it.
It's a great question. I'm just reading
You guys
through it one more
talking?
time to
Yeah, take your time. Mm, mm,
it's a great it's I mean it is an important it's an important point. And I think the truth is I don't know the answer to that. I don't
mm,
want to pretend that I do. But what I'm starting to wrap my mind around and come is quantifying the what if we don't. And
mm,
this is like when we start to look at um, reinsurers and long-term insurance, like the insurance world is where this, I think, has a role to be played. And I think what we're finding with climate change is that the
mm,
models for
mm,
insurance have all failed us. We're seeing
mm,
that in the past few years, especially. Nobody in Venezuela where the flood just hit they're going to go bankrupt because they did not expect this much water and they did not expect this much damage. We saw it all through the US. Like they're still waiting on money in West North Carolina from Helene. You know why? Because there is no money because nobody accounted for this level of devastation. And we're
mm,
seeing, and what I'm saying with that is I think we can use that a bit as an analogy in the health world
mm,
and start to think about what happens if we don't begin to quantify these things on our balance sheet. What if we don't start really thinking about these costs to society at a this is a macro shift. I keep saying that
mm.
because I'm starting to realize how much we need some macroeconomic shifts as a
Yeah,
society. And
yeah,
those are big things to change. I mean, I think a
totally.
quick example of this is like if you're an inpatient care at a hospital, you should have the food as medicine diet and your insurance company should pay for it. They're already paying
Mm,
for the meal. It's just we valued the meal at a buck 15 or 49 cents or whatever it is per patient per day. Meanwhile, there's
mm,
this awesome salad bar downstairs you can go pay $15 for, but
mm,
upstairs the patient's getting some crap. You know,
mhm,
I just was in the
mhm.
hospital with a family friend and I was appalled at the food, right? So why don't we start with that and build that? There's an economic opportunity there. Let the insurance companies figure out how to make that financial model work. And I'm
Yeah.
drastically oversimplifying this. I realize that, but I
Mhm.
sometimes have to do that to like eat these whales. I have to think about it on this
Yeah.
really reduced way. So it's just
Yeah.
one way is like the truth is there's not here's what I really come and I'll stop with this. I don't think there is a tremendous amount of economic opportunity here. I think there's a tremendous amount of economic risk if we don't do this. And I think that there's a need to distribute wealth more equitably to
Mhm,
return less on our stock market expectations so that we can afford to pay for this stuff. That's
mhm,
what I think if anything there's
mhm,
that end of the spectrum is where we need to be thinking. If anything what this is going to do is going to cost more. It's going to
mhm,
hurt really bad because we've been
mhm,
externalizing all of this for so long and
mhm,
we're either going to have to do that or not. And I
mhm,
think you have people dancing around sure, there's a venture solution here, private equity, or we'll make an app or we'll do this. Yes, there's some GDP claims to make here, but there's a bigger elephant in the room to me is that we're
mhm.
not accounting for this.
The
We're
cost.
not
Yeah.
really accounting for this properly. And so that
Yeah.
becomes a cost accounting thing. And again,
Yeah.
I am thinking out loud because I'm trying to process these same exact questions in my mind. So I wish that I was a
Yeah.
better expert to answer that, but that's where my mind is now.
No,
Curious.
that was great. Go ahead, Sheila. Did you have
I'll just
a
and I'll quickly say I am in the venture world and the investment side, and it's still a question for myself, right? So that's the thing I absolutely you can speak to almost everyone, and they are interested and they believe in it. And then when they're trying to justify the ROI, it's like, well, give me some statistics, give me some numbers. And it's like, well, how about life? And how about
yeah.
like
We're-
resilience of life? But it's
Yeah.
figuring out that narrative with some numbers is really something that I always look for partnership on.
Yeah. No, totally. I think the pitch
Thanks,
for
Sheila.
me, Asher gave me some good time to think, which I really appreciate. But the pitch for me feels really different, whether it's philanthropic funders that you're seeking or investors and like VCs, because I think for with philanthropy, we've taken the approach of being like, this is how much diet-related disease are costing the US healthcare system like every year, the very cheapest possible in like intervention to lead to the most savings is through food. It's so much cheaper than pharmaceuticals and like inpatient care and being in a hospital. So, the preventative health measure, there's good research that I think we've written at least one or two proposals that points to some of those, cost savings, like Asher was saying. And then I think with investors and people expecting some ROI, there's to me, I think like maybe it's not the whole thing that you're talking about of valuing food grown in healthy soils into the human health world, but I think demonstrating that physicians on farms can have a really important impact on institutional things like institutional procurement and patient-facing care will allow for some institutions or maybe investors or maybe larger healthcare networks to have people pay for this experience, and then it kind of embeds it within the system as it's kind of like designed in. I also think we're trying to work with policymakers to help shift policies around these pieces of integrating farming and healthcare. But yeah, it's not clear to me like what the VC role in this whole space like can be and should be. So I'm really curious to keep talking to you, Sheila, and yeah, we'll learn as we go, Asher.
Agreed. And thanks, Sheila, for bringing that question to the table. It's very important about
Mm.
for us to be thinking about that.
Yeah. I'm gonna go back into a little part of Sharon's question of related to cooking the food and like kind of culinary medicine. Do you all do any sort of like on-farm like cooking culinary demos, or like do you have a chef that you regularly work with? Like how does that piece fall into talking about and sharing the food that you grow with the community or doctors?
We I've been involved in these kind of off and on in my career over the past really 5 to 7 years, which is like we supplied the meat and then I shared a little bit about it at the event, kind of a thing. So
Mm,
that's been my current experience. But where we want to take this is we're actually in the middle of a downtown Carthage. For those that don't know, we're an hour east of Nashville in a small town that's 2,500 people, about 5,000 in the county. Very traditional Southern agricultural community. And so it's got your classic downtown strip that's kind of in need of some revitalization. In that process, we're putting in a store bakery concept that is wrapped up in the nostalgia of Mr. Gore's life in Carthage growing up, and then this desire to give back to the community and be a part of this rural revitalization. All that to say, we see that store as a home of the brand for us, and
mm,
we've built it in a way with the bakery and
mm,
the floor plan to be able to do this type of a
mm.
thing. And
So
there's a
cool.
restaurant in the hotel one building over. And I've had the challenges and the constraints of that this is a private home and a private home from someone that's high profile, and privacy and security is something that we have to take seriously. That said, we don't just have a come on into the farm whenever you want. We have a satellite farm that's like that, but the meeting space is less, conducive to that. So we're moving in that direction and I'm excited about it.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I'm excited to do some
And I
cooking.
welcome if there's, I haven't done this before, I'd have to go do some research. So if there's any resources or learnings or someone out there you think's doing this really well,
Mm,
um, I'd love to learn more about it because I think that's something that we really struggle with in Smith County, like many rural low income communities around the US, is the diet and the culture around food and our relationship to food. And you can see it. You can see it everywhere as someone who's privileged and has had my background and like eats healthy. I've got kids in school. It's incredibly apparent there's a disconnect in the food that we're growing or the food that we're eating. And, this does get into this other question about public policy. And I think that there's a strong case to make in public policy for this. And I think public policy is one of the few tools we have to shift things at a macroeconomic level at scale. And that's an opportunity I think we have in this space around everything from the dollar value that the USDA is allocating to the schools for school lunches, institutional
hmm
support, the way that we use the farm bill money,
hmm
and sure there's an argument to make like get rid of the nanny state and let people innovate and do it themselves.
Mhm.
There's the side like, let's use this. These are strong levers and allocated dollars. Are we just going to put all this into crop insurance programs and county match programs?
Mhm.
Obviously, there's the whole other supplemental nutrition side of the farm bill, and
Mhm.
that does its thing. But then there's the farming, like there's money there, and I see it. I'm hesitating because I'm just internalizing the lift to make this type of a shift. But at the
Yeah.
same time, I can see the power of this lever. And I
Yeah.
think what I'd encourage all of y'all to do is, if you haven't thought through this, which I'm sure many of you are, it looks like a capable group, is to just look at how Silicon Valley was formed, to look at the role that patient capital from the government played in that. And I think
Mm.
regenerative agriculture and nutrition is a great way to use patient capital. And I think we often think Silicon Valley was just a free market thing that happened. Sure, some stuff happened in the 70s with like corporate tax, yada, yada, that blew it up. But the government
Mhm.
made Silicon Valley. And if you read into that,
Mm.
you can see how analogous that is for
Mhm.
what we're trying to do in regenerative ag. And the
Mhm.
one, you either have high, like, there's few places that can provide the level of patient
Yeah.
capital needed to navigate, Sheila, these return issues that we're talking about,
Yeah.
these times of lack of profitability as we understand, as we shift the narrative and shift these systems.
Yeah.
Someone has to lose. We need to share in that as a society because this is everybody's problems in some ways. And at scale, it becomes a societal and global issue. So
Mhm. Yeah.
these
I
are
mean, I
these
see
are
a
some
lot
things I've
of
been thinking about.
Totally. I see a lot of people trying to get into the policy space by having like getting USDA and other maybe healthcare side or health policy to fund research to show that, cover cropping is a good in climate extremes, or so that like cover cropping could be a required thing covered under federal crop insurance. And probably similar things for healthcare. You have to show that an intervention works to then get health insurance programs to cover it. But I think the problem to me and all of that makes it such a heavy lift is that there's industry sponsored research and tons of like very well paid lobbyists who are like trying to show that glyphosate is still safe to eat, and like that the pharmaceuticals that we develop and provide are going to be what saves people from obesity and diabetes. And like I think so there's always someone that can be like, well, you have that research and I have this research, so if I'm going to pay the congressperson to listen to my research. And so I think there's just like that research is again really important, but I think it also gets back to even just like our participation and like, yeah, grassroots change movements around elections and voting and like getting it's just so deeply rooted, the food and healthcare system that we have, but it obviously has changed and can change and needs to change again. So I think holding some of that historical perspective is a really important thing for like all of us to do collectively. Um, and then, yeah, I just keep finding ways to make the change, whether we're demonstrating it in these exciting pilots or we're finding policymakers to come in and like see and be a part of like what's happening, what we're doing. Because I think if you really have changed someone's heart and their mind, like they're not going to be, I don't know, maybe this is idealistic and naive, as easily swayed by a very well-paid lobbyist, but we'll see. Um, ugh.
That's part of the weight and tension that I feel. And I think the bottom line on that is we can't consume our way out of this. And we can't like solve some of these complex issues by just thinking about a profiting market-based solution all the time. Yes, that is our driver, but the whole degrowth world and solid state stuff and exponential growth on a finite planet feels like we just don't talk about it. And if you do, you're radical, like
Yeah,
like endless growth is gravity.
yeah,
It's just
yeah,
the only way. Like, I think
yeah,
we're just having a creativity deficit in our ability to reimagine new things. And that's
yeah.
part of what social world does. And that's what happens when you're at the bottom of the echo chambers. You only hear yourself. So we really got to try to get out of that space.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, I heard that the degrowth movement sort of rebranded themselves, and I can't actually remember what they rebranded as because like everyone was like, well, we can't really be degrowth forever because growth is still has such a powerful hold on the mind as like a generally good thing. So anyways, Kate Raworth and Donut Economics and frameworks coming out of England, I think Sheila might help speak to that. And if anyone remembers what degrowth is rebranded as, please tell me. Um, Yeah, and then Asher, I wanted to offer Robert Edmiston at Turner Farms in Ohio is a potentially really interesting resource to bring down to Caney Fork as you guys get going with the new hotel hospitality site and general store. He is, I think, on the board of the Teaching Kitchen Collaborative and runs a farm with a culinary teaching kitchen where he does a lot of work with like healthcare professionals coming to be on the farm and cook on the farm and just like
Mm,
integrate the experience with including the cooking culinary side in a really interesting way. But he's like a lawyer in his background and got into this because his wife got sick and he, sort of fell into access to a farm. So he's just a really interesting, I think, resource.
yeah,
One of the only ones I know in the teaching kitchen world who's also kind of doing the teaching kitchen on the farm. So it's
I love that. I'd
we
love
can
to
try
be
and get him down in
connected.
September. Yeah. Um, Okay, well, we have just 2 minutes left. I think Diana had a question in there about Caney Fork participating in any farm to school programs in Tennessee. So maybe we'll touch on that. And if you have any other questions, feel free to dump them in the chat. And if we don't get to them, I'll still do my best to answer them.
Thank you for that question. We have not yet. We almost kicked off a program with Murfreesboro, which is a city outside of Nashville. But it really relied on the champion who retired, and that's kind of part of this issue is that you lose the champion, they retired, and my emails fell on deaf ears for the new director of nutrition. That's
Mm,
one piece. That was going to be for a pilot this year. We are
mm,
actively in a capital investment phase for scaling our produce operation, and are building some more covered growing area to manage just the changing climate and the risks that we navigate throughout the year. And we have some pretty good scale growth targets from the produce world, and we've got some retail partner contracts
mm,
that are compelling, that are going to help the farm on the profitability side. And with
mm,
that, we'll have the scale. We're really about to engage and try to push some of this stuff through. But what we found in Tennessee is there's no money for this,
mm,
and the money comes from the USDA. Sandy Shealy at Murfreesboro applied for this USDA grant with a partner. That grant
mm,
said, don't even bother starting unless you have 80 hours. So, or 40 hours, excuse me. So she and her partner tag teamed it over the weekend for a month leading up to it and did this completely in her own time to get this basically USDA funding to buy local. And that's how she did that work in Murfreesboro. My county doesn't have that at all. There's no budget. So what our plan is, and this is a real market solution, is sell high to the Whole Foods and the Sprouts markets, and then be prepared to give away X to these at whatever they can pay for to try to pilot this, because this is really close to us, and this is every state's totally different as this. Like
yeah.
California is probably light years ahead on this, and it's been fun to
Mm,
kind of learn from Cali and then think about that in the context of a state like Tennessee.
hmm Totally. Thanks. Yeah, thanks for that answer and good luck fighting the good fight.
Yes.
Okay, well, we are just at the top of the hour, so I'm going to just close things out for today. I'm happy to stay on for a couple minutes if anyone has a logistical question. But Asher, I'll let you get back to your family and your day and life. And thank you so, so much for being here and being part of the conversation. I hope we represented Stephanie well and really excited for the growing partnership.
I really appreciate being here and for everybody's like engaging questions and thoughts. And I put my email in there. If something didn't make sense that I said, or if there's feedback on how I could do better, I'd welcome that feedback. And yeah, just grateful for the opportunity to participate in this. Thanks, Lainey.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you all. Take care. Have a
All
great
right.
rest of your days. Bye.
See you guys.